અજીતભાઈ તમે વિડીયો ઓન કરજો પ્લીઝ.
Okay. One second. Sorry. Give me 1 second. Okay. प्रणाम बधाने. To start with the prayers. नमो पर्यन्ताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयर्याणं नमो वत्सायाणं नमो लोये सप्पसाहुणम् एषो पञ्चनमुक्कारो सप्पपावपणासनो मङ्गलानं च सप्पेसिं परमं हवै मङ्गलम् वीरसरसूरा सुरेन्द्रमहितो विरम्बिदा संसृता वीरेणाभियत स्वकर्मनिचयो वीराय नित्यं नमः वीरातीर्थमिदं प्रौतमतुलं वीरशिखोरं तपो वीरे श्रीधृतिकीर्तिकान्तिनिचय श्रीवीरभद्रं दिश कमठे धरणेन्द्र च शोचितं कर्म कुर्वति प्रभुस्तुल्य मनोवृत्ति पार्श्वनाथ श्रियेस्तु वः अंगूठे अमृतवसे लपतितणा भंडार श्री गुरु गौतम समरिये मनवांछित फलदातार Welcome everybody to the sixth class in this Introduction to Jainism course that we are doing. I hope you are all enjoying the content. I've had a brief review of the questionnaires that you have filled up. I've not seen all the results, but what we have seen so far is very encouraging, and we will be discussing the results and what you have suggested in the answers to those questions that we posed in the survey in the next class. Also, Sandeep has informed me that next week we will keep the class closed because of Diwali. So next Tuesday there won't be a class, but there will be a class the following Tuesday. So that's just the brief announcement that I needed to make. We discussed some questions that you posed, and there are quite a few other questions that have come through, but we will struggle with time in answering questions today. So we will take a lot of the questions the week after next, so in the next class. Also, somebody has sent a clip of pravachan by Param Pujya Ratna Sundar Sri Maharaj Sahib about Naukar Mantra, and they wanted an understanding of what is being said. I think it might be best if I discuss that with that person directly, and maybe a brief summary of that at the next class when we do the questions and answers. So I won't be taking an answer to that during the class today. Okay. Now let me share my screen. Second. Give me 1 second. I'm just putting this together. Just one last slide. Okay. So we are on week 6 of the Introduction to Jain Dharma. The topic, as we had decided initially, was a brief summary of the life of Bhagwan Mahavir and a few other Tirthankars in the current time cycle. Initially, I had planned to discuss the lives of Bhagwan Mahavir Swami, Parshnath Bhagwan, Nemnath Bhagwan, Rishabdev Bhagwan, but I think we'll be running out of time, so we might actually extend this particular topic for a couple more of the classes. So this week we will just concentrate on the life of Bhagwan Mahavir and brief description of Bhagwan Parshanath. And this too will be in brief, because there is we could spend about 20-30 weeks discussing the life of each Tirthankar, but this will be just a brief introduction to that as well. We said the prayer. Again, just to remind people, the format of the sessions is about process and outcome, listen, reflect, debate, question, internalize, and ultimately we hope that we can incorporate some of the learning into our lives. So today's topic is Tirthankar Bhagwan Mahavir and Bhagwan Parshanath. Brief description of these two Tirthankar Bhagwan's lives from the Kalp Sutra. Most of you have heard of the Kalp Sutra. Just to remind you, during Paryushan, the readings from the Kalp Sutra are standard practice, and that happens during the 8 days of the Paryushan festival that we just observed about a couple of months ago. And all that we are going to talk about today is actually extracted from the Kalp Sutra, which is the Jain holy book, as some of you might know it. Let's start with the 24th Tirthankar Bhagwan Mahavir, who was born about 2500 plus years ago, and he is the 24th, that is the last Tirthankar of this particular time cycle. Now, towards the end of this class, we will have a brief reminder or discussion again of the time cycles and what the aras actually mean and what happens during the 6 aras of this time cycle that we are talking about. We are currently in the descending time cycle, and at the moment, according to Jainism, we are in the 5th ara of that time cycle. We'll come into some details of that at the end of the class. Now, this first line here, when I'm talking about 27 major lives before becoming Tirthankar, I think that requires some explanation for people who are not familiar with these terms. And I've mentioned this along the during the classes to an extent, but it's something that we all need reminding repeatedly. So at the beginning, we said that the soul is eternal. There is no time in the past that the soul did not exist, and there will be no time in the future when it does not exist. The cycle of birth and death has been going on for all of us for infinite numbers of lives in the past, and will go on until the last birth before we achieve nirvana or go to moksha. Once a soul has reached moksha, then there is no rebirth. That is the final resting place in moksha, where there is eternal happiness, total peace, total knowledge, and no scope of coming back and suffering anything. Now, when we talk about the lives of a Tirthankar Bhagwan, the counting only starts from the particular life during which the soul of the Tirthankar achieves a level of spiritual development called Samyaktva. And for all of us, as I've mentioned in one of the classes before, that moment when the soul recognizes its own nature and the awareness of it being separate from the body and the true nature of the universe and the true nature of the right devs or gods that we need to preach to, the right gurus or teachers, and the right path to follow. It is that level of understanding that starts off the development of the soul towards moksha, and the duration that the journey takes can vary from soul to soul. Incidentally, Bhagwan Mahavir's soul has actually had the greatest numbers of lives out of all the other 24 Tirthankars that uh, the Kalpasutra talks about. The majority of the Tirthankars achieved Samyaktva, achieved the Punya Karma to become Tirthankars and became Tirthankars and went to moksha within 3 lives. Bhagwan Mahavir's journey started long time ago, and his soul had lots of ups and downs before he reached the final life, being born as Bhagwan Mahavir. Now, all Tirthankars, when they are destined to become Tirthankar, the karma that actually gives them the power and all that accompanies being born as a Tirthankar, so all the worship, all the huge influence, all the help from the devs, the uh, establishment of the Tirth, all those things are as a result of the greatest punya karma that anyone can ever acquire. And that punya karma, punya means good, that which will bring good and happiness, that punya karma is called Tirthankar Nam Karma. Normally that happens in the third life before the final birth as a Tirthankar. So in Bhagwan Mahavir's case, the acquisition of Tirthankar Nam Karma happened in his 25th birth, when he was a Rajkumar called Nandan Kumar, and he then became a monk called Nandan Muni. And during that time, during his long life as Nandan Muni, he performed a large, he performed a lot of austerities and firmly established Tirthankar Nam Karma. So he established the punya that would then guarantee him birth as a Tirthankar. So just a few brief words about what is punya karma. We'll talk about karma at some stage, but we divide karmas in many different ways, but one way of dividing them is punya and pap. Punya is what will bring you material happiness, material wealth, material circumstances that would make your life easier and more pleasant. All that is due to punya karma. Pap karma is that which will generally in the end bring you unhappiness, will push you down to worse forms of life, will result in one's punishment depending on the severity of the pap karma. So, and in simple terms, what is punya? What makes us acquire punya karma is being good and doing good. What makes us acquire pap karma is being bad and doing bad. So in very simple terms, those are the um activities that push us into cycles of life and death, life and death, life and death. So after his life as Tirthankar, as Nandan Muni, and Bhagwan Mahavir acquired Tirthankar Nam Karma, he went, his soul went to the 10th Devlok, that is heaven, and after spending a long time there, in the 27th birth, he was born as Bhagwan Mahavir. Now there is a lot of detail about his birth and his conception, and the fact that every Tirthankar's the 5 great events in their lives means the time of their conception, that's called Chyavan, the time of their birth, the time they take Diksha, the time they acquire Keval Gnan and establish the Tirth or the Dharma, and the time that they acquire Nirvana or achieve Nirvana and go to moksha. So these 5 great events are called Kalyanak, meaning for Tirthankar Bhagwan, those events are extremely auspicious, and it is said that in each of these events, every life in the universe actually experiences a moment of happiness. So at every time a Tirthankar Bhagwan is born, because of the strength of their punya, the time they are conceived, the time they are born, the time that they achieve, they become a monk, the time that they achieve Kevalgnan, and the time that they achieve Nirvana, those moments are moments of great joy and peace and happiness for all life in the universe. So those are called 5 Kalyanaks. Bhagwan Mahavir, during his long life, which was in fact shorter than all the other Tirthankars because of the nature of the time, spent the first 30 years of his life as a prince. He was the son of King Siddharth and Queen Trishla, and a lot of you have probably heard the stories of his life in those 30 years and how he lived that life, about his childhood. A lot of these are commonly taught to children, but we won't go into the details of that at this stage. But the details of his childhood and his life as a prince are described in detail during Paryushan at the reading of Kalpasutra. So maybe if all of you can find some time next year during Paryushan, we'll be doing this uh, reading, and you could take advantage of that if you've not already experienced that. During his life of 30 years as a prince, there are few important incidents that are often described. His love and care for his mother even while he was in the womb, uh, his strength and valor and courage when he was very young as a boy, playing with his friends, his great knowledge that was uh, demonstrated at the time that the family thought that he needed to go to school, and as was the norm during that time, uh, a prince would be taken to school for the first time with a lot of pomp and ceremony. But on the day, the young Bhagwan Mahavir ends up teaching the teacher who was supposed to be his guru and teaches him. And obviously, Tirthankar Bhagwan has great knowledge, and even before they achieve Keval Gnan, they're born with Mati and Srut and Audignan. Audignan is the awareness of things within a certain radius, and all Tirthankar Bhagwans are born with that Audignan, which is an extrasensory knowledge. It tells the person possessing that particular ability everything that is going on around a certain radius from where they are, and that radius may be very huge for some great people. It may be very short for some people with a weaker form of Avdignan. For a Tirthankar Bhagwan, it is always of the highest quality. So he ends up teaching the teacher there, and he continues to grow. At the age of 30 years, he becomes a monk and spends about 12 and a half years doing severe penance. The details of the penance that he actually performed during those 12 and a half years are also extremely inspirational, but also awe-inspiring, because the number of days that he actually ate was very small. He never ate more than one meal on the days that he actually ate. Most of that 12 and a half years period was spent in fasting, and he suffered a lot of different difficulties. The term that is used to describe this is called upsarg, meaning great episodes of pain inflicted by other beings, sometimes due to natural changes, but a lot of them inflicted by bad people. And the worst of them was one that was inflicted by a dev called Sangam, who, because he's quite jealous of a human being so worshipped by other devs, that he comes down to test him, and he makes Bhagavan Mahavir suffer for a huge length of time, almost about 6 months, and continues to uh, make it his life extremely difficult. And the details of that are actually heartrending if you go into the details of that. Bhagwan Mahavir spent about 30 years after he achieved Keval Gnan, going from place to place and establishing the dharma and preaching to people. And that went on for 30 years. And Tirthankar Bhagwan only starts preaching after he achieves total knowledge. After they achieve Keval Gnan, only then the Tirthankar Bhagwans will actually start preaching anybody. Tirthankar Bhagwan Mahavir achieved Nirvana at the end of the fourth Ara. There are about 3 years left to the end of the fourth Ara. That's when Bhagwan Mahavir achieved Nirvana. Now, we'll talk about just one story from his long life, the 12 and a half years of his penance. There is one very inspirational story of the snake Chand Kaushik. A lot of you may have seen this illustrated in various places. This illustration can be seen in lots of temples. It can be seen carved out in marble in other temples. There are pictures of this in set in copper etching. It's a very inspirational story, and it's very well known. So today I'm just going to recite this particular story about Bhagwan Mahavir, and that is as far as we will discuss Bhagwan Mahavir's life today. So let us come to the story of Chand Kaushik. Now, during those 12.5 years when Bhagwan Mahavir was traveling from one place to another barefoot without any clothes, he comes to a forest one day and he has to cross the forest. The village which is very near the entrance to the forest, he enters the village and the villagers actually tell him that please do not go along this path, which is a shorter path through the forest, but it's also very dangerous. There is a better route which is slightly longer, and we urge you to take the longer route. Bhagwan Mahavir obviously knew what he wanted to do and was aware of what is going to happen during his journey through that forest. So he takes the shorter path and goes along that path. The villagers were warning him not to go to that path because they said that there is a very, very poisonous snake living in that part of the forest, and his sight itself is actually poisonous. So the moment he opens his eyes, whoever he looks at gets poisoned and dies on the spot, and the area around where he's living, the trees and everything else have been sort of poisoned, burnt down, and that particular snake has created havoc there, and nobody actually goes to the area that he frequents. So please do not go there because your life is in danger if you come across the snake in that path. Now, who was Chand Kaushik? In his previous lives, the story starts in a life where Chand Kaushik's soul was in the form of a tapas. Tapas are people who spend their lives meditating, who live a restricted life in a forest and make their uh, feed themselves from the fruits of the forest, or sometimes go to the villages to beg some food. They are not like Jain monks who have taken on the 5 great vows, but they live a life of austerity. Uh, if anyone of you have ever seen pictures of the Kumbh Mela that occurs in India every 12.5 years, based on the cycle of Jupiter, a lot of the such tapas and sadhus come along to the Kumbh Mela. It's a huge gathering of a lot of spiritually inclined people in India. A lot of you may have seen pictures of that. So Chand Kaushik in the third life before was living as a tapas, and he had a lot of disciples. One day, as he and his disciple were walking from one place to another, there is a small frog that was jumping up on the road, and in this particular tapas and his sishya were walking along a path, and accidentally this tapas steps on a small frog and crushes her, or him, crushes her. The disciple sees this and tells the tapas that, look, you committed a sin, you have accidentally killed another uh, five-sensed being, and you need to be asking for forgiveness and taking penance for that sin. So he reminds him of that at the time. And the guru, the tapas, remembers that and goes along. Towards the end of the day, when they reach a particular place, the young disciple reminds him again, and he says, you've not yet done the penance for this accidentally killing that particular frog. And the tapas listens to him. And then when they finish their penance, their sort of pratikraman towards the end of the day, and he is still not taken any penance for it, or he is not even acknowledged the fact that it was wrong, and that he is sorry that he has killed a frog accidentally. The disciple, his young person, reminds him again. Now, this constant reminder by somebody who is subordinate, somebody who is much, much younger than him, and who is actually his disciple, irritates and angers this tapas. And he becomes so upset and angry at this disciple that he runs after him to hit him and thrash him. As he is running, in his rage, he does not see a pillar in the place that they were living, and he hits his head against the pillar. And because he was running almost blind with rage, and he was running probably very fast, the impact that he has on his head actually is severe enough to kill him on the spot. Now he dies, but his next life, the karma for his next life had been acquired at a time when he was actually in a better state of mind and he was doing something good. So his next life is spent in a devlok as a dev, following which he gets born again as another tapas in another forest. In this particular forest, there are lots of fruit trees, and this tapas and all his disciples are very careful and keen on looking after the fruit trees and preserving them, because they are the source of their food and they are attached to those trees. One day, some princes from the local kingdom and their friends come along and look at the very rich fruit trees that abounded in this forest and start picking those up. Now, this person Kamat, sorry, not Kamat, Chand Kaushik, the tapas Chand Kaushik, is trying to preserve his fruit trees, and he runs after these princes who are trying to pick the fruit up from the trees and taking them with them. He is very upset and very angry, and in his fit of anger, he runs after them again, and unfortunately, even this time, he falls into a pit which is quite deep, and he dies on the spot. And because this time he has died, Chand Kaushik, that was the name of the tapas, is born in the same forest as this particular snake called Chand Kaushik, and he has the extreme level of poison in him that even his sight is poisonous. So Chand Kaushik, the snake, spends most of his life in anger, burning everything that he sees and constantly being upset and angry, until the day when Bhagwan Mahavir comes along and comes to the place where Chand Kaushik was roaming about. Chand Kaushik sees him and he starts looking at him with anger and venom. He thinks that he is going to poison this person immediately, but nothing happens to Bhagwan Mahavir. And he's surprised that the poison in my sight would actually burn people and kill them almost instantaneously. Why is nothing happening to this person? And he gets upset, he gets more angry, and he rushes to Bhagwan Mahavir and strikes him with his fangs on the foot. And this is what you can see. He's just struck Bhagwan Mahavir on the toe. And what you can see at the bottom of that picture emanating from Bhagwan Mahavir is a small amount of white liquid. Now, our Shastras tell us that Tirthankar Bhagwan's blood is actually white in color, and from the wound that Chand Kaushik, the snake, had inflicted on Bhagwan Mahavir, his blood is coming out, but Chand Kaushik thinks that he should be seeing red. Instead, he's seeing something white, and he's surprised. He's puzzled. This has never happened before. His poison has never actually been ineffective in killing somebody. If you can see what the artist has depicted in this picture, that all the trees are almost bare. There are only a few leaves surviving. They are just branches which are completely bare. And this Chand Kaushik, the cobra snake, standing there looking puzzled, and Bhagwan Mahavir has raised his right hand, and he very calmly, compassionately tells him, "Booze, booze, Chand Kaushik." He addresses him by the name of his tapas in the previous life and says, "You," and addresses him as that and says, "Booze, booze" means calm down, quieten down. And listening to Bhagwan Mahavir and reflecting on this very surprising event that a person has not been killed by him with all the poison that he has inflicted on this person, Chand Kaushik listens to these very kind, calm words, and suddenly he acquires the knowledge of his previous lives. And he remembers what happened during his first life, how he was trying to run after his disciple and hit his head against a pillar and died instantaneously. His life as a Dev, from the punya that he acquired previously before this particular event, his life as the tapas Chand Kaushik in this forest preserving the trees of fruit and being angry that somebody was picking up his fruit and taking them away and running after them and falling into a pit and dying. And he remembers his birth as Chand Kaushik the snake. And he remembers all this and then suddenly realizes what has happened. That because of his severe, uncontrollable anger, he's destroyed anything good that he had done and ended up in this particular state as Chand Kaushik, a snake. And he decides that all I've done in this life and previous lives has been angry, being angry all the time. But in this life, Because of my anger and because of my poison, I've killed so many living things. I've been such, I've committed such a grave amount of violence during this life. Now that I understand that all this begets nothing, all it has brought me is pain, he suddenly understands compassion, his anger is gone, and the snake then calms down completely. And he says, in his mind, he thinks that if I'm actually going to stop being harmful to other living beings, then the only way for me is to close my eyes and stay in one place so that the poison that emanates from my eyes will not poison any more living things. And he decides that I want to live the rest of my life in that way without harming any other living thing. So he just decides, closes his eyes, and lies down in one place. And Bhagwan Mahavir, having accomplished his particular task for this particular event, carries on walking, knowing that Chand Kaushik is now on the path of emancipation. Chand Kaushik quietens down, closes his eyes, and stays in one place. And the villagers who have now heard that the danger from Chand Kaushik is no longer there, slowly venture into the forest, see that Chand Kaushik is actually lying in his area with his eyes closed and that he's not a danger to anybody. So they then decide that he should be worshipped, and they bring in pots of milk and ghee and pour it over him as they worship uh, snakes, and they in different ways. So these similar kinds of pujas do go on even currently in India in some places. And Chand Kaushik's place where he's lying down is now littered with a lot of milk, a lot of ghee, a lot of sweet stuff, and obviously that attracts lots of ants, and the ants come along and bite him and start eating, biting his skin and slowly eating him away. And Chand Kaushik, over the next few days, slowly dies in suffering, but he does not actually get upset or angry again. He has become totally peaceful, and at the end of that life, he gets born as in a Devlok, and that is the emancipation of this. Now, the story is told very briefly, but uh, many years ago, uh, Vijay Ramchandra Suriswaji Maharaj is one of the great acharyas of our current times, actually spent a whole 4 months reading out the previous lives and describing the life of Chand Kaushik. And a book has emerged from that particular series of sermons, pravachans, and there is a Gujarati version. I don't think that anybody has translated that. It's a two-part book called Patan and Uthan, Patan and Uthan, meaning the fall and the emancipation of Chand Kaushik. So it's a very beautiful book. If any one of you read Gujarati, it's worth seeking that book out and reading that. So that was one inspirational story from Bhagwan Mahavir's life. There are many others, but we won't go into the details of those others at this stage. The 23rd Tirthankar, Bhagwan Parshvanath, who actually achieved Nirvana about 382 years before Bhagwan Mahavir achieved Nirvana. So he predated Bhagwan Mahavir. If you look at the time between their nirvans, it was about 382 years. Bhagwan Parshanath was the 23rd Tirthankar. He lived 100 years, and his journey from the time of his initial emancipation, his initial achievement of Samyaktva, was 10 births. And what is peculiar and interesting in this life story of Bhagwan Parshanath is that there is an ongoing association with another life who in the last life gets born as a tapas called Kamat. And the association between Bhagwan Parshanath and Kamat started off from the first life of Bhagwan Parshanath that is being described and carried on life after life until they both meet again in the final life of Bhagwan Parshanath. He was Bhagwan Parshanath, and this other person was a tapas called Kamat, and he later became a yaksh called Kamat. A lot of you may have seen pictures of this, and they are illustrated in various temples as well, similar to the story of Bhagwan Mahavir and Chand Kaushik. Now, who was the life of Bhagwan Parshanath and this person called Kamat? Let's briefly look at that particular life. This is an illustration of the life of Bhagwan Parshanath and Marubhuti. So who was called Marubhuti in that life, and his brother who was called Kamat in that life. Kamat was the elder brother, Marubhuti was the younger brother. They were both children of a minister in the king's court. Unfortunately, the elder brother Kamat was very different, very sensual and pleasure seeking in everything that he did. And Marubhuti, who was the life of Bhagwan Parshanath in the future, was the exact opposite. He was very calm, very respectful, very loving to other people, and living a very decent life. When the two brothers became of marriageable age, they were both married off to beautiful wives. Marubhuti's wife was very beautiful, and unfortunately his elder brother Kamat had his eyes on her. And once when Marubhuti was away with the king on a battle, Kamat approaches his brother's wife, Marubhuti's wife, and talks to her and says that, will you please have a relationship with me? Marubhuti's wife was not interested, and she thought that it's going to be really difficult to escape the clutches of my husband's elder brother. But she is clever, and she says, your brother is away, I can't promise you anything, but come to my place on this particular day, and sort of calms the situation down at the time. And when the day comes, before that particular day that they agreed to meet arrives, she actually goes away to her parents' house. And Marubhuti, who is away doing battle, has not imagined anything like this ever happening. But Kamat comes to his wife's residence, his brother's wife's residence, and not finding her there becomes extremely upset and abuses her servants and her maids and creates havoc in that palace. Marubhuti's wife, who is gone away to her parents, then comes back and recites the incident to Marubhuti. There are slightly different versions of this part of the story from different books that you may read, but ultimately Marubhuti is obviously very upset that this has happened, that his elder brother is behaving in such a way towards uh, his younger brother's wife, and he decides to go to the king and complain. The king, on hearing this, is obviously very upset, and he decides to punish Kamat, calls him to the court, and tells him to get out of the kingdom, and in such a way that the whole town knows that he's done something bad and something wrong. So you can see it in this picture. If you go from the top left and come down, the incident with uh, in the palace where Kamat is abusing a lady there, and then the second picture in the middle where the king is listening to the two uh, brothers, and then the picture below that where the king has set out the punishment for Kamat, and Kamat is sitting on a donkey and being ridden out of the town into the forest. And Kamat then finds an ashram of tapas and asks them to take him in to their fold, and he lives with them and follows their path, and he becomes quite devoted and performing severe penance. Now, after this event, Marubhuti, who is the life of Bhagwan Parshanath, keeps on thinking that maybe he was too harsh in complaining to the king, and his brother has now been uh, banished from the kingdom and must be living a very difficult life. He had heard that he's living in the forest as a tapas, and he feels really sorry for his elder brother and decides to go and visit him and ask for his forgiveness. When he goes there, Kamat, the tapas that you can see in the last picture on the right of that particular clip, sees him from a distance and thinks that he has come to again uh, tell him off or fight with him, but just seeing his younger brother and thinking that he is responsible for this particular degradation and the life that he is now leading, because he complained to the king and the king banished him. So he actually sees his brother as the culprit and has completely forgotten about the bad deed that he did. And in his hatred for his younger brother, he lifts up a stone from where he is sitting, and as his brother comes near and bows down to him, he hits the stone on his head and kills him. That is the first life of Bhagwan Parshvanath, in the life that he actually achieves a level of spiritual uh, development. And then there are several lives after that, where a lot of the lives are of a five-sensed animal, so of elephants, and there are lots of stories around those lives as well. We won't go into the details of that, but in this journey, Marubhuti goes from one life to another, slowly climbing up spiritually, and Marubhuti's brother Kamat continues to deteriorate from one life after another, holding on to the grudge and the hatred for his brother, and constantly being thrown into an association with him in each life, where he ends up actually trying to kill his brother again and again. His brother in the first life that we just talked about, but in the other lives they just meet, and this is how a lot of relationships actually go. So Jain Dharma teaches us that a lot of the relationships and associations that we have in our current life come from previous encounters with the souls of the people that we are actually encountering in this life, and all that connection that we have with people in terms of likes, dislikes, the attachment, sometimes even the hatred, sometimes even the dislike of some people, has got some roots in previous lives. Now, we're nearly at about 9 o'clock. Very briefly, let's talk about the current time cycle. We all know that we have had 24 Tirthankars in this current time cycle. Bhagwan Parshvanath was the 23rd, Bhagwan Mahavir was the 24th. Bhagwan Rushabdev was the first. Now I know I have explained this in brief previously, but this particular time cycle is called Ausarpini, meaning that everything declines from the beginning to the end of the sixth ara. So every time cycle in the place that we are living has got 6 divisions, and in this descending time cycle we are currently in the 5th division, or the 5th ara, the length of which is 21,000 years. The next ara will be the 6th, the length of which is 21,000 years as well. The 4th ara, the length of that is 1 Koda Kodi Sagaropam, which is a huge amount of time, as I was describing last time, minus 42,000 years. During that long period of 1 Koda Kodi Sagaropam, 23 Tirthankars are born and achieve Nirvana. That is the fourth ara. The first Tirthankar is born and achieves Nirvana at the end of the third ara, and that was Bhagwan Rushabdev. And soon after his Nirvana, the fourth ara begins, and then the 23 other Tirthankars are born during that time. And during that time, there are also Chakravatis, Baldevs, Vasudevs, and other great lives and other great beings. And they are all described in a book written by M. Chandracharya called Trisasti Shalaka Purush Charitra. And there is a translation of this available in English, and it's called the Jain Saga. I don't know exactly who has translated it, but it's I think a 3 or 4 volume translation of Trisasti Shalaka Purush Charitra in English. And it lists the lives of all the 24 Tirthankars, the lives of the Chakravatis, the Baldevs, Vasudevs. Incidentally, according to Jainism, Ram and Lakshman of Ramayana were Baldev and Vasudev. So Lakshman was the Vasudev, Ram was the Baldev. Krishna and Balram were Baldev and Vasudev. And similarly, a lot of the other great lives are described in this particular book, and they are in great detail. Just to give you an understanding of the times that actually one sees between the nirvana of one Tirthankar and the next, just listening to some of the time scales will give us an idea of how long we are talking about. So if you start with the 24th Tirthankar, Bhagwan Mahavir Swami, he achieved Nirvana 382 years after Bhagwan Parshvanath achieved Nirvana. Bhagwan Parshvanath achieved Nirvana 83,750 years after the 22nd Tirthankar, Bhagwan Nemnath. Bhagwan Neminath, who was the 22nd Tirthankar, achieved Nirvana 500,000 years after the 21st Tirthankar achieved Nirvana. So the time scale of our 24th Tirthankar then goes on, and then we are coming to figures which are, say for example, the 21st Tirthankar, Bhagwan Naminath, achieved Nirvana 684,900 years before the 20th, after the 20th Tirthankar Muni Savrat Swami. So after the 20th Tirthankar Muni Savrat Swami achieved Nirvana, the 21st Tirthankar Bhagwan Naminath achieved Nirvana after 684,900 years. This is what's described in the Kalp Sutra, and it goes on like that. And then we come to numbers which are actually in the category of something that you can't actually put into words or count. So that is the length of the current time cycle. And as we were describing last time, this cycle goes on and on. After our sixth ara, the next time cycle starts, and there will be 24 other Tirthankars in that time cycle. That time cycle is actually ascending, meaning everything begins to improve. And the 23 Tirthankars are actually born and go to moksha in the third ara of the next ascending time cycle. And that is how this time cycle continues in this place called Bharat Kshetra. There are 5 such Bharat Kshetras that I mentioned. There are 5 similar Airavat Kshetras where similar rules of the changes in the conditions with time continue. And as I mentioned, that there are other areas called Mahavidya Kshetra, where it's always like the 4th ara that we have had here, when the 23 Tirthankars were born. So that is a brief summary of the time cycles that we are talking about. Week after next, when we resume our classes, we'll briefly talk about the life of Bhagwan Neminath, the 22nd Tirthankar, and the life of Bhagwan Rishabh Dev, the first Tirthankar. We will not go into the details of the lives of the other Tirthankars, but a lot of you in the survey have asked about the format of these classes, and just very briefly, some of you feel that what we are doing is just about right. Some of you have felt that it would be useful if we went into a structure of important topics like Nav Tattva, Chadravya, 9 Tattvas, the 6 elements, the 12 um, vows of a Jain householder, the 5 vows of a Jain monk, and all those important topics, the Jain rituals. Some of you actually want to learn a lot more about the rituals, and Sandeepai and I are discussing how we would format the classes, and we'll come back to you with results of the survey and the details of how we can cater for the different kinds of suggestions that you have made in the survey. Those of you who have not filled up the survey yet, please do so. You will all have received it, and send your feedback to us, so that helps us design the classes and lessons better. We will continue to look at your questions, and I will answer them as we go along. You sent questions to uh, myself individually last week, and I'll look at the questions that may have come this week as well, along with Ketan Bhai and all the other team members of the Zoom team. So we'll collect all the questions and we'll try and answer them as we go along. It's now 9:15. It's 10 past 9. I think we'll end the class here today. Is there anything, Ketan Bhai, that's burning in the chat?
There are a few questions.
We've got about
I'm not
5 minutes. If you want to maybe share one or two, I might be able to answer if that's
okay. So one question is, how many years into the 5th ara are we?
So we are, after the 5th Ara started about 3 years after Bhagwan Mahavir's Nirvan. So the 4th Ara finished about 3 years and certain number of days there. The 5th Ara is 21,000 years. It's about 2,500 plus years since Bhagwan Mahavir's Nirvan. So we are about 18,500, 18,400 years from the end of the 5th Ara. So we have passed about 2,500, 2,600 years into the 5th Ara. And the description of the 5th Ara, as we are seeing it unfolding during our lifetime, is that things will gradually get worse and worse in terms of the the way we live, the lifespan, the difficulties that we will face, and some of these things that we are currently facing about the environmental uh, uh, difficulties that the scientists are forecasting, the shortages, the droughts, the floods, the earthquakes. A lot of these things are happening in a greater frequency than they would have happened during a period when things were much calmer and better. Wars, the levels of destruction that is currently happening, all that is very well described as the slowly ongoing decline, and probably much beyond our current lifetimes, worse things are likely to will happen, and the details of those are clearly described. The sixth era is much worse than this. That is again 21,000 years, and we could spend a whole class looking at the description of this, and that is also fairly well described in Kalp Sutra, and there are other texts for it. So briefly, that is the answer to that question. Anything else?
There's another question I think will take time to answer. Talking about the past lives of Sangam Dev. And the last question was, is Jati Smaragnan a type of Avdignan?
No. Jati Smaragnan is just the knowledge of your previous lives. It does not extend into the knowledge of all the material things around you and the kinds of things that are happening. I mean, Avdignan is the knowledge of extrasensory knowledge of what's happening in a certain radius around you with different people, with different things. Jati Smaragnan is only the knowledge of your previous lives, and that may extend to 1 or 2 lives, it may extend to many more lives before that. There are examples of knowledge of previous lives even currently. There are a lot of well-documented cases of children remembering their previous lives and being clearly describing what went on and where they were in their previous lives and what happened to them. So there are quite a lot of well-documented cases of that. Some of you may have heard that the author of Anne Frank's diaries, this is a story that I've heard, and I think there is a narrative on this on YouTube or Google, was her current life and the fact that she remembered where Anne Frank was and went with her parents to that particular place and found where the diary was actually hidden. I think there's a story about that. But there are lots of others well documented cases that if you search, that is Jati Smaragnan. But for most of the time that I've read about the current examples, are the knowledge of just one life prior to that as far as it's been disclosed. It's also said that Srimad Rajchandra had the knowledge of many of his lives previously. So Jati Smaragnan is not like Avdignan. And the previous lives of Sangam Dev, I would actually have to go and search for it. I have not come across any detail. I'm sure if you have asked that question, maybe you heard something, and I'm sure that the references are available somewhere. But personally, I do not know the answer to that question. But since you asked, I will make inquiries and see if you can get an answer. Okay.
Thank you, Ajit Bhai. It
Thank
was
you.
very interesting topics today with Mavi Bhagwan there as well. Just wanted to confirm that next week is Diwali, and so we are not going to be having a class. next week. Is that correct, Ajit bhai?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah.
And
And so just wishing everybody a happy Diwali, and see you in the new year.
And also Kshamapna at the end, if I've said anything that is against the teachings of the great Tirthankars in Jin Bhagwan, I apologize and ask for forgiveness. Manvachan Kaya Kari Tasmichhami Dukadam. Sarvamangalamangalyam Sarvakalyana Pradhanam Sarvadharmanam Jainam Jaiti Sasanam. Incidentally, the extra verse in the prayer initially that I talked about was about Bhagwan Parshanath. It was a stuti to Bhagwan Parshanath. Kamathe Taranendra cha sochitam karma kurvati prabhustulya manovrutti Parshanath sriyestuha. So Kamat and Dharanendra, they were, one Kamat was trying to harm Bhagwan Parshanath, Dharanendra was trying to save him. Sochitam karma kurvati, they were doing those things as they saw fit. Kamat out of hatred and Dharanendra out of worship was helping. Kamat out of hatred was trying to punish and destroy Bhagwan Parshanath. Sochitam karma Kamate Dharanendra cha sochitam karma kurti prabhustulya manovrutti. Parshanath Bhagwan was seeing them both with equal compassion, with no dislike for the person who was trying to punish him, and no rag or attachment to the person who was trying to worship him and help him in any way that he could. Sochitam karma kurti prabhustulya manovrutti Parshanath sriyestuva. I bow down to that Bhagwan Parshanath. That is what that particular verse means. Thank you. Okay. Goodbye.